In this episode, I interview Wilco Klein Ovink from the Wrangler in Whakatane. Wilco embodies the classic number 8 wire story. He's a farmer who built a solution because nothing suitable existed. Then he turned that solution into a thriving business that sells innovative products to New Zealand farmers and exports around the world. This is a great conversation, especially if you want to hear how Kiwi ag tech companies can commercialise ideas, navigate exporting, and build strong distributor relationships. Or if you simply enjoy hearing number 8 wire innovation stories that go global. Wilco Klein Ovink, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
So you've gone on a journey, the number 8 wire journey of the farmer, then into the inventor, then the manufacturer and exporter. Take us back to how all of that started.
So in the early 90s, I was working on a farm and actually, I probably got to go further back than that. So in the 80s, I was working on a particular farm and an animal got hurt in the process of trying to treat lameness. So at that point, I already started thinking, okay, this is not right. Something's wrong. So then we get to the 1990s, and we were contract milking / managing a couple of farms, and I thought, okay, time to see what I can make up, just botch something up, because we did a bit of research and found there was nothing in this country with regards to being able to treat lameness.
So for me, who's not a farmer, city dweller all my life, almost, how do you treat lameness?
You have to restrain the animal properly and then lift the offending hoof that maybe has either a stone bruise or has some ulcer or something that's wrong. And so you have to restrain the animal properly in such a way that you can hold the hoof nice and still so you can examine it and trim it. It's like your fingernails. It's trimming fingernails. But you also then have to secure the cow to make sure she doesn't fall down. So that's been the big bugbear, and we're still finding now even that people are saying that when they're restraining a cow, if they're not using the proper equipment, cows can fall down, they can hurt themselves. So that's what you're trying to alleviate.
Okay, and I imagine some danger for the actual farmer in that process too.
Correct, yeah. It's not uncommon for us. We don't notice it so much anymore now, but we used in early years, we used to find guys coming to us and saying they'd either been, they'd cut themselves with the knives, because the knives are very sharp, and or having been kicked by a cow or having done something that's because she's not been restrained properly and he hasn't been able to do, she hasn't been able to do the job properly, so... Yeah.
Okay, so you see this problem,
yes,
and you look around, there's no solution. So the Kiwi ingenuity comes out and you decide to create something.
Started to create something. We made it out of just bits and pieces of scrap metal that we had on the farm, because I was a bit of a jack of all trades anyway. I love tinkering and just making stuff, if I needed it, if there's a need for it. So after about a year on the farm, we had a local vet, a Dutch vet, who used to come on the farm, and he said to us all the time when he had to treat lameness, because some of the cases were just beyond our knowledge, he would come on the farm and he said, "Man, you need to start marketing these things. It's just it's safe for the animal, but it's also safe for me, the operator, for the vets coming in." So he then pushed us to say, right, you've got to do something about this. So 2 years later, we then decided to have the first one made, and we took it through to the Fieldays for the Invention with a prototype award, and we won a prototype award with that. And to us then, we thought, okay, well, if these guys can see that there's a merit in it, it might be worthwhile pursuing. So we did this while we were still farming, but in the meantime, I had got my welding ticket, but being a farmer, I didn't have the time to start manufacturing these things properly. So we then handed on to a friend who was a workshop foreman or a manager of a particular engineering firm in our area, and we gave it to him to say, well, we gave him the rough plans of what we wanted and the prototype, and he had that, well, the very first model, and he had that with him, and he then made the next step and created Mark II, basically. That was a commercially viable one. So
okay, yeah. And thus the innovation was born.
That's where it all started, correct, yeah.
So what happened then you were farming at that time? At some point along the journey, you decided to go all in on manufacturing.
Yeah, so we, in 2000, decided to give up farming. So I worked for a few years as a sales rep for Wrightsons and for what was then RD1, which is now Fonterra Farm Source, which taught me even more about systems and sales and writing emails. And so that was all, it was all lead up to it. And then we had a period in the early about 2003, we had a guy who'd got a brochure from us back in the late 90s. He'd been chasing us down for a couple of years trying to find us to hunt us down, because he wanted one of these Wranglers. And he said, oh, please, for goodness sake, start making these things again. Just go and do it and try selling them. So took the bull by the horns, but I wasn't quite prepared to give up my farming job or my salesman job with Farm Source because it was a secure income. So we thought, okay, well, what we're going to do is we'll do, I think at that stage it was 3 days at Farm Source and 2 days doing the Wrangler, just, trying to market them. We still had somebody else making them for us at that stage, and we'd do the marketing for the Wrangler. Fast forward a few months, it got to the point where I just had to say to the manager at Farm Source, going on a business mentor we had, he said to me, you're doing 2 half-pie jobs. Now, you either got to do one properly and do nothing, or you just basically got to, throw one away. So then we thought, okay, well, that's it. Let's give it Wrangler a go. And that's how it all pertained into coming into action in 2003.
Well done. So the big commitment.
The big commitment, yes.
That's brilliant. And so how do you take a product that is not available in New Zealand, you've created something, people aren't even aware that it's there, you're trying to reach your rural sector. What did you find? How did you get that to market? It sounds like you started with Fieldays.
Correct, yeah. So the very first Fieldays we ever did were the ones here in Mystery Creek. That was in 96. So like I said, we won a prototype. In 97, we won a new equipment award with it. Once we got into the manufacture, we started doing a bit of research as to, what other options were available with regards to Fieldays, because farmers are one of these lovely people. They love to kick and touch and play and actually it's that big, or it's, it looks like this. So to actually physically see something. So we decided, well, we're going to start doing a lot of the regional shows as well. So there are about 4 or 5 around the country that we then would take a trailer load full of Wranglers with us and start showing these things. Plus a little bit of print advertising, which was, at that stage when you're starting up, print becomes an expensive form of advertising. But we knew that the results from it were relatively good. So that's Waverley's division, and she did a fantastic job in trying to just get the print into the right papers. And because farmers, another thing about farmers is that, especially of that generation, of my generation, is come breakfast time, you sit at the table and you open this paper and you just start looking at papers. So we decided, well, that's a good time to start hitting them. So we tried to pick specific papers or print that we thought were relevant for the business, and it was mostly farming rags. So we then Waverley started writing articles. We also had noticed, even at that early stage, we'd noticed we had the spider web effect, where if we had a unit in place somewhere around the country, anywhere around the country, we used to start noticing sales around the area close to that particular proximity of that one unit that might be there. And we used to have a program before Google was there. We had a program, it was called Termons, and we used to note down where every one of the sales were. And it was really interesting to see this web effect where it just grew out from that one centre point there. So to us, that said, okay, so we're doing a good job by advertising, going to shows and doing print advertising, but also word of mouth was a big thing as well.
Yeah.
And that was purely through that effect of the web, how it was growing. And there were several regions in the country where we really noticed that extensively. So we had that. We spent a lot of time researching into what was a viable option to look at. Do we look at sponsoring Shemilker of the Year? Which is we did that after I think about 2-3 years of going. We started doing that because that to us was we gave away a Wrangler as a prize, and we initially I think did only one region in the country, but then we did one North and one South Island, so we did 2 regions. And that was just finding the right target audience. You know, you've got the right people there. You've got the go-getters in the industry that want to just let's make it work. So, you know, a lot of that, the marketing side of things is very, very, Waverley is very instrumental in getting that side of things going.
Yeah, nice. So your wife, Waverley, really drives the marketing side, and then you're driving the innovation and the rest of the business side?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. So I like that example of sponsorship, because I've seen so many sponsorship things where it feels like a waste of money, where it's not related to their target audience so clearly. But with that level of sponsorship, you're hitting your perfect target market, and you're giving away one of your products as the prize.
Correct.
Which makes it seem, obviously, it must be important. It must appeal to people because that is the prize.
Yeah.
Nice and exclusive, and gets your product right there in front of target market.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And then over the years, from looking at your website, you've developed a number of other products that you've brought to market. Yep. So I just want to run through a few of those, and then we'll get into the story behind them.
Okay.
So first of all, you've got the Wrangler, and so that's for treating lameness and for restraining the cow safely. Then you've got the ride over gate. Just tell us briefly about what that does.
The ride over gate is literally a gate that is on a mechanical spring system that you can nudge with a short wheelbase vehicle. You can nudge and you drive over the top of, and then it springs back and sits upright again.
Right, I've seen, ATVs, quad bikes, even motorbikes driving straight up to it, and it just flattens out, and yet the animals can't get through it.
They it's not that they can't, it's another visual barrier, and they seem to stand at bay. We've had a few cases where people have said they've had an issue where a cow suddenly found, I can knock this gate, and they start pushing it. But then there is a remedy to fix that problem as well. So
nice. That works really well. Then one of the other products is the Kiwik alpaca shearing table.
Yeah, that was developed by a guy. He was a alpaca breeder here in actually just south of Cambridge, and he had somebody in Tauranga was making them for him. This guy was the guy that was manufacturing. His health started going downhill, so they were looking for somebody else to manufacture it. And actually, we'd taken it a step back at some of these field day shows that we were at. We used to get people coming to us and saying, "Hey, I've got alpaca, but how do I treat their hooves or their feet, and how do I shear them, and what can I do? Can you manufacture something?" And we sort of thought, well, it's outside our game of knowledge. And so we went to this guy at one of the field days here in Mystery Creek, and he actually said, well, actually, ironically, that you've come and asked because I'm just actually looking for somebody to manufacture these tables. So it's a design by him. He fully thought up the idea. Somebody else made them for him. They were just looking for somebody to manufacture them. So we've just taken the manufacturing side over from that.
Okay, and then selling them as well?
Yes, correct.
And now you got the Pollen Smart.
Pollen Smart, that was something that we actually used to have kiwifruit, a small kiwifruit block ourselves as well. And I had a friend come to me one day and he said, "Look, I need pollination in kiwifruit." He came to us and said, "Look, I'm paying contractors, waiting for them. They're showing up at the wrong time of the day. I might as well dig a hole and bury my pollen in there and throw money away because it's wasting the time not doing it properly. So can you manufacture something?" So at first I said to him, "No, I'm too busy. Go away." I couldn't be bothered with it. And then he kept going at me and saying, "You've got to do this." And my wife and Waverley said to us, "Well, let's give this a go." So we then, after manufacturing a prototype and doing extensive research work on how efficient it was and how good it worked, we took it to the field days with. The first one was just purely a prototype. We took it to the field days with all the results and had marketed or had made Mark II with it. We won the Field Days Award, which was actually the innovation award, the principal, the top award, innovation award with it back in 2016 with that, because once again the results showed, they spoke for themselves.
Right, and the unit itself, looking at the video footage, it's enormous. It gets pulled behind a tractor, and it's got all these tubes going everywhere, and it looks pretty incredible.
Yeah,
so
Waverley likens it to a Dr. Seuss invention. It just pipes and everything and colour and it's Yeah.
It does. It looks spectacular. And then one of the final products we'll just touch on briefly is you've also got a motocross starting gate.
Yep. So that came about being with we were sponsors of a motocross team that was headed up by what she was then Mary One-Hill already, but she was known as Scary Mary Perkins, and everybody that was in the motocross scene knew who she was because she still is a legend in herself anyway. But so they were running a motocross team, and we thought, now what can we do for this team? Well, we sponsored them anyway, but we thought there's something else we can do is that maybe they can practice their starts, because the start in the motocross is quite crucial. So we manufactured up just a single motocross starting gate that could be linked in up to about 5 together, and so that started into fruition. And then we had clubs coming to us and saying, "Hey, can you make club gates of 40 a set of 40 at a time?" So that just sort of grew that way. So. Yeah.
Nice. Once an innovator, always an innovator, eh?
Yeah, can be a pain.
Well, I'd like to look at that challenge of the awards that you won and that balance between awards versus commercialization, because awards look wonderful and it's a trophy to go up on the wall, but to turn it into a commercialized product can be quite a journey. What have you experienced along those lines?
Yep, you're right on the money there. So first is finding a need in the market, not just a want, but a need of something that may be helpful to aid in whatever you're trying to cover. So, with the awards, you're trying to manufacture something that you think people are going to need. That people are going to need, and you then have to spend, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 months just doing research and building your particular whatever you're trying to build. So coming up with the idea first so I've got a gap in a market of something that's required. What do I need to make it work? That comes at a cost as well, because obviously it's called R&D, or research and development is a beautiful thing, but you don't get paid for research and development, unfortunately. So,
no, you don't.
No, so it's got to be commercially viable. So, and we constantly get people coming to us and saying, "Hey, why don't you make this sort of thing?" And I said, "Yeah, fantastic idea, but I can't make it commercially viable, maybe because somebody overseas can make it cheaper than we can, or the automation is set up to make that sort of thing cheaper. And there is a need for it, but just not commercially viable to go down that line." So
there has to be enough of a market size, enough of a demand in order to put that R&D in. Although at times we put the research and development in, we build a product, and then we find that, okay, there's not quite enough of a market there.
Yeah, it does happen. Yeah, it does happen. There's, I think we've sort of, to a degree, we struck with the Pollen Smart. We struck it right with the Pollen Smart, but that has now been surpassed because of the wet pollen that I was talking about. That is now they've changed that a little bit, and so our dry pollen still works very well. So we've spent a lot of money on getting the Pollen Smart ready and going and working, and we sold quite a few units of them. But the market has moved on. Everything sort of moves on. So unless you keep going with it, it's one of these things that you have to keep the R&D up with the game and keep redeveloping. And sometimes it's a commercially viable where you think, yeah, it is still worthwhile, and sometimes you think, really, do I just put it to bed? I've done my bit with it now. So.
And that's a challenge to make that call when you've got all that investment. The phrase escalation of commitment comes to mind. Because I've done this much work, I need to keep doing more work.
Yeah.
And so choosing when to make that call as to, right, we're actually going to stop in this space.
Well, for us in particular, with once again getting to the Pollen Smart, we got to the point where if we kept pushing it, we could make it work. But our core products are the Wrangler, the Ride Over Gate. Those are the two core products, and those are our income. And so the one thing I didn't want to do, because with Pollen Smart, it's a very, very seasonal thing. It's basically for about a month and a half to 2 months over the whole season where they will move. So you then have to gear yourself up for those 2 months, and you've got to gear yourself up probably 4 or 5 months previous to that, or prior to that, to try and to at least cover the manufacturing of the products. And it got to the point where we were sacrificing Wrangler sales or Ride Over Gate sales just to keep the Pollen Smart going. And so we had to start thinking, at what point do we say, okay, enough of this? Our bread and butter is the Wrangler and the ride over gate, and the classic saying, stick to your knitting. Well, that was our knitting basically. So.
Yeah, and so the effort to push a new product, or especially so seasonal, actually was affecting the core business.
Yes.
And so choosing, okay, we're going to put less effort in over here. We're going to focus on the core business because of the actual benefit that can come.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
And because too, with the Wrangler and the ride over gate, the potential for export is far bigger than what the Pollen Smart is.
Well, there's a key part there as well.
Yeah.
So actually, tell us about the ride over gate, because that has an interesting backstory because you weren't the inventor of it.
Correct. So back in 2011, we were about to go to Fieldays, about a month and a half, 2 months out from Fieldays. We were going to go to Fieldays, and we had a site that had a bit of room there, and we had a local guy from Edgecombe come to us and said, look, I've invented this thing, Mark II already, so he had Mark I out there for a while, but I've invented this thing, but I just need to be able to show people, Mark II this gate, because I think it's a fantastic idea. And so we caught wind of it and had a look at it and thought, yeah, this might be worthwhile. And we had a bit of room. We said to the guy, look, you do your own thing, find a site, find a section on our site, set it up, and then you can do with it what you want. So he organised a quad bike and in a corner of our site, and for 4 days he just went backwards and forwards over this ride over gate, ding, 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 ding. And people, even the neighbours, were getting sick of this ding, 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 ding now noise all done, with it bouncing, because it's on a spring mechanism and it makes a little bit of noise. And
you've got to demonstrate. When you've got a product like that, you have to demonstrate.
Got to demonstrate it, correct, yeah. And so he, after about 3 or 4 days, he lovely guy, but just doesn't particularly like dealing with people so much. And so at the end of it, said, look, I think I like you guys. I'm an inventor. I'm not a manufacturer. I'm not a salesman. So if you guys are interested, you can buy the patent off. Well, actually, at that stage, it wasn't patented, but we patented it together. So we've got a patent between the two of us. So we did the patent afterwards. But he said to us, well, if you'd like to manufacture and sell them and give me a commission on everything that we sell here within New Zealand, then we'd like to make it work. And we said, yeah, let's give it a go. So between the two of us, we got a patent. So the patent's under both our names, so under our names and under his name. And because he won a prototype award with that particular ride over gate as well. So, and part of the prize was a bit of finance from one of the local patent attorneys to cover the cost of a patent. So, yeah, it was his idea, and he sort of basically handed it to us with the idea of he gets a commission on every sale in New Zealand. So.
And that is the different skill set, isn't it? The inventor versus the actual business person who can commercialise and take to market.
Yeah. Because he's one of the guys I was talking about before. That's a serial inventor, comes up with ideas all the time, and sometimes I've just had to say to him, "Yeah, look, great idea, but I'm sorry, it's just not going to be commercially viable to do." So this one in particular is, though. So yeah.
And now you mentioned patents.
Yes.
So tell me about your journey with patents.
Oh, they're fun. Patents, they're great when you first start up, because it does keep a lot of the wannabes at bay. With a patent, you have, in the first year, you have a patent pending, so that covers basically anybody in the world, and it covers, you're well covered for it for the entire world. Then after year one, you then have to choose which countries you want to take this particular patent out in. In this case, with the ride over gate. So the Wrangler was only for New Zealand. The ride over gate we only did for New Zealand, not even thinking about export at that stage yet. And so same thing with the Pollen Smart as well. But Pollen Smart we actually did a few other countries. But so patents are they're a great way to protect your IP, providing you are willing to defend it.
And that's the catch.
If you've got a big player that says, bring it on, then you then have to be prepared to sit in court and spend lots of money to lawyers who will fight for your patent. If you win, then you get finance recompense for it. If you don't, you've taken your eye off the ball, with your own business because you're concentrating so much on trying to defend that patent, and you could be at a loss for $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 just to try and defend a patent.
And so where did you come on this? Because I know that a competitor came in against the Wrangler at some point.
Yeah. So we had a competitor come in. He started coming into the country and bringing stuff in from overseas, and we actually at first panicked a bit and thought, oh, flip, here we go. We're going to have somebody that's going to be taking our business and selling our product. But what, in fact, it actually did was that with him having the product there as well, he was heavily marketing his product as well and his system of what he had. But what was happening, it was broadening the horizon of getting the word out to farmers. Hey, hoof problems are a big problem, not just physically, but also financially as well, because of the cost of hoof problems. So what it in fact did was that it meant that with both of us being out there and Waverley writing a lot of articles and him writing articles, it made the awareness of hoof problems bigger. So in effect, it probably upped our sales by him being there as well. What it did stop, however, was the little wannabe engineering firms that thought, I can copy this and I'm going to make it as well. So they were, some firms were literally copying our product and making them. And we'd pretty quickly get onto those guys and say, you realise we've got a patent and we could take you to court, and that would stop them straight away. But selective, I don't know,
defense.
Defense, became an offense because, we were able to the awareness of lameness became bigger.
That's interesting. So you chose not to take on him. But it's nice to hear how you were easily able to fend off the little guys who were trying to rip your product off.
Yeah.
But with him deciding, look, we're not going to go to court, but actually it increased the awareness of the category overall.
Yeah.
So there was an unexpected advantage to not defending the product or the patent.
Yeah. Well, a patent's never free. They're pretty expensive things to try and behold. And I know personally of a guy who spent $600,000 trying to defend a patent, and he still didn't win it. He lost it. And he took his eye off the ball in the process. And so because of that, we started thinking, okay, maybe we are better off just letting this guy do his thing and making the industry more aware of the problem, of the lameness problem. That it's beneficial to both parties, basically.
Interesting. And now with the Pollen Smart, you did choose to take out patents around the world.
We did.
And I understand that it's pretty expensive to even just maintain.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So basically, your initial patent. So as I said, it was a patent pending on the whole world that we had on the Pollen Smart first, and then we decided, okay, which countries in the world are going to be growing kiwi fruit? So there's obviously Chile, China, Italy. Now, I believe Argentina and Spain are starting to grow, kiwi fruit as well. But so it was Italy, China, and Chile were the three main threats at that stage when we first took out that one there. So we decided, okay, well, let's take a patent out on these countries. Each patent was somewhere in the vicinity of $5,500 to $6,000 for each country. So, and then your annual maintenance fee as well, because you're dealing with translators, when you're writing stuff out, you're dealing with translators, so you can throw another $2,000 just on that alone, just each year, just in maintaining that patent as well. So
that adds up pretty quick.
It starts adding up, and you've got to sell a lot of product to stay, to even make that work.
And so, did you look at potentially licensing it around?
We looked down the line. We looked at it. Didn't really pursue it heavily enough, I guess, for want of a better word. We could have done a little bit more down that front, but decided to. China is one of these wonderful countries. They are now trying to, where there's a patent, there's patent protection to a degree, and Zespery's having the issue there at the moment because somebody brought some G3 type kiwi fruit into the country of stock, and there's copious quantities of kiwi fruit grown in China now, and so China. Unfortunately, the patent protection is getting better over there, but it's still an industry that's really, really vague on that front. For us, because of this big, wonderful machine that it was, to send one over to each country, we'd fill up a 20-foot container with maybe 2 or 3 of these Pollen Smarts. So to actually export them as well became an issue where I guess we hadn't done enough research on the exporting side of things to say, well, yes, we're going to do it, or no, we're not going to do it anymore. So we decided to pull the pin on that export side of things with that. So
Yeah, and that's the tension. So
It is.
so there's only one of you. Even as the team grows, there's still limited resource. Where do we put our effort?
Yeah.
In order for growth.
Yeah.
And now with that, it seems like you made some pretty good decisions, because what was the growth like as the business grew?
Okay, so from when we first started doing it ourselves back in 2003, we basically, for the first, up until about 2008, so that's 5 years, we doubled in size each year. So our business grew, double in size as far as sales went, and likewise, obviously, the team had to follow suit as well to be able to cope with it. So we grew in size with numbers as well. We had astronomical sales in 2008, just before the beloved GFC hit and the San Lu issue. But yeah, it just literally grew from 2003 to 2008. It doubled in size each year.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, so keeping the eye on the ball actually paid off.
Yeah.
And now I'd like to switch to talking about exports, because you've said that, of course, you have expanded into exports. Which countries are you exporting to?
Okay, so we have a distributor based in Australia, and we have a distributor in the US. Both of those countries. So Australia takes the Wranglers and the ride-over gates. The US takes the ride-over gates, and we sent a container to Australia about 3 weeks ago, and we're just making one up for America at the moment. We have exported individual units to Wranglers to the islands, so a couple of the Pacific Islands. We've sent to Brazil. We've done South Africa. We've sent a couple of Wranglers to the States as well. Ride-over gates, those countries I mentioned, some to the UK as well. Our alpaca tables, they seem to be, alpacas are one of these supposedly cutesy animals that you either love them or you hate them, but we've sent the tables to the UK and to Germany. But the problem with sending one-offs is the cost of sending them over there is astronomical. So unless you can send a partial shipment, what they call LCL, so a loose container load, or a full container, it just doesn't become economically viable. We've had people saying, I don't care, I just want one anyway, so money's not an object. But once again, the alpaca industry was something that just after the GFC, that fell flat on its face. It was one of these boom-bust industries. But there are still people there that grow them just for the cutesy factor. They have them as a pet in the front lawn sort of thing. So yeah, so we're exporting, like I say, primarily to the States and to Australia, but some loose countries around the world as well.
Okay, that's quite a range of one-offs, but then also Australia and the US being the dominant ones. So what percentage of your revenue comes from export markets?
At the moment, it's about 20%. And it seems to be growing. Australia seems to be growing quite well. So I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this year we're at 25% of our revenue. So it's growing nicely, considering we've really only started exporting properly in about, I think it was 2014, somewhere around that.
Okay,
we've done one-offs a little bit here, but the proper exporting about 2014, I think it started. But yeah, so we're at about 20% at the moment.
That's great, and room to grow.
Yes.
What have you found about the market being in Australia or the US versus what you're selling in New Zealand?
So Australia they're incredibly parochial for their own products. The market in Australia for our ride-over gates has predominantly been for people putting them under. Putting the ride-over gates under what we call a centre pivot irrigator. So if you're anywhere inclined and you've seen these lovely circles, you've been up in the sky and seen the lovely green circles, it's a pivot it's a irrigation system that pivots off a centre point and then goes around in a circle. And so what they have in certain instances, in particular in the sheep industry, you have to have decent fences to keep these sheep at bay still. dairy cattle, and if you're travelling down country in the South Island, you find copious quantities of these things, but it's mostly dairy country, and you can run them over 2-wire electric because stock seem to, you can keep a dairy cow behind a single wire electric. With sheep, you have to have at least 3 or 4 wires, electric wires, or you have to have 7-wire post and batten. And so where this pivot then runs over the top of the fence or goes through the fence, you either have to open and close gates all the time, or in this case, in Australia, we're finding predominantly the guy, he's selling them there to people that have got sheep and irrigators, and he'll sell 10, 12, 14, 20, 25 in one hit where they're putting them in place in the fences.
That's beautiful. And I've seen the footage on your website of this enormous irrigator, these enormous wheels just rolling straight through the gate. The gate collapses down, it goes over and it pops back up.
Yeah.
It looks great. So in the Australian market then, you're finding that the ride-over gates, and you said the US market, the ride-over gates, and in New Zealand, more of the Wranglers than the ride-over gates.
Yeah, New Zealand, we're selling more Wranglers, and probably, to be quite frank, I think we're probably selling more ride-over gates in Australia than we are in New Zealand as well. So Australia's definitely our biggest market. The US at the moment would be a close third to New Zealand, so that's a growing market as well. And over there, most of the pivots are on cropping farms, so they don't have stock anyway. But we're finding more and more farmers in the States that, without sounding rude, they can't be bothered getting off their vehicles, so they love these ride-over gates because they can ride them through the gates in a normal farming setup. So we're selling more and more of them just as individuals, or as multiples of 2 or 3 of, just for them to be able to drive through the fences rather than having to open and close gates all the time.
Interesting how the market changes between countries.
Yeah.
So as you've expanded and you've gone from farmer to innovator to manufacturer and then stepping into exports, you've had some assistance from NZTE, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, I understand.
Yeah.
Tell us about that journey of where were they able to help in terms of just guiding you on the process?
So we did a couple of NZTE's path to market to Australia. Where they helped out, it was in particular, it was the guy that was driving it. He was actually trade envoy to Australia for quite a few years, and so he picked it up. He's a very close friend of ours now, but he kept pushing us, and he kept saying, you can make this work. You've got to do market research, and you've got to try and find a distributor. And finding a distributor is the hardest part. Actually, getting the product there is easy. It's actually then finding somebody to distribute it for you. That was the hardest part. And so NZTE, to a degree, we found some of the stuff, the information that was coming through was pretty meh. But this guy that was helping us, David was his name, he was very, very good at helping us and keeping us on target and helping us with information that we needed as to, what do you look for? What are the rules you have to go through to get a product into the country, and what steps do you have to take with regards to, do you have a bank account here, or do you send it back to New Zealand, or what do we do with the finances? So there's actually, it's a bit of a minefield, but once you've stepped into that minefield, it actually becomes easier. It's just taking that first step and finding, what can you do and what do you need to do to be able to market product in the likes of Australia. Now, as I said, Aussies are extremely parochial with their own products. If it's Aussie made, it's great. If it's made from somewhere else, they couldn't give two hoots. Thankfully, New Zealand dairy, and I think Gallagher was probably the main leader on this, have made New Zealand dairy-related products a worldwide entry into the world, where they say, well, if it's dairy-related, it's got to be pretty darn good to be able to to come into our country. So, and there are several other companies. Excuse me. There are several other companies in that have gone into Australia basically on the back of Gallagher, and we're one of them because of they have stepped into the market and said and produced a good product, and so it's we were quite afraid initially because one thing NZTE said to us initially was that said, if you're going to go to Australia, don't put Made in New Zealand stickers all over it because they won't like it. Our distributor is actually based in Tasmania, and Tassie loves Kiwi stuff.
Interesting.
They love Kiwi stuff. And he said, don't be afraid to put it on there because they like Kiwi product, Kiwi farming made product. They like it there. So he said, don't be afraid to put New Zealand made in New Zealand stickers all over it. So, yeah.
Nice. And so you get this. So you get some information, but you also get that personal advice from NZTE. That sounds like it really, really opened things up for you.
Yeah.
Tell me about the path to market.
So path to market, what that was they took us to they first interviewed us. So we had to be of a certain caliber to be able to go over there. So what happened is they took us to Melbourne so twice over. So they took us to Melbourne to a conference basically over there for us New Zealanders. So we were taught about what expectations there were and all the rules about foreign exchange and all this sort of stuff. And then they would take us out on the road and meet farmers over there, and we'd go to rural retail stores and just to see what was out there. And so path to market, what that did was basically it got us one foot in the door to see, okay, this is the market you're going into. These are the distributors you're dealing with. These are the farmers you're dealing with. This is the sort of stuff that they're looking for. And it's basically a research, but it's a research that was funded by NZTE, which helped us, because if we're going to do it off our own back, where do you start? Unless you've got somebody that knows about the product, where do you start? And as I said, this guy, David Powell, if I can drop his name, fantastic. And because he was trade envoy, he knew the right people to deal with, and he was very helpful in getting us through those first steps. So we did the first one. As it turned out, when I did the first path to market, I'd been approached by New Zealand Dairy, the Australian Dairy Conference, as a guest speaker at one of their conferences that was held in Northern Victoria, to be a guest speaker on the Wrangler on lameness. So I was there together with a couple of other Kiwis were there as well. And that that started me off. And then the second path to market, we thought, at that stage, it was still quite tough to get into the country for us, we found. So then David said, look, give it another go. Do another path to market, see what you think, and we'll see if we can match up with some other people. And so then after the second path to market, we then found a guy who had actually seen us at Mystery Creek here. He'd come to us, an Aussie guy had come to us, and he said, well, we're quite keen to sell your product here. That sort of... No, actually, sorry, take that back a step. So it was the first one that we had was a guy. I did a show like a regional field day like this, like the one here at Mr. Creek, but this was in Warragul in southern Victoria, and there was a small herd improvements, like livestock improvement, or a small version of that was based over there. And this was a South African guy who had one of his team members come and see me at Fieldays and said, this is something we could probably market here. So, but the problem with that particular firm was that it wasn't the firm, it was just the one person that was driving it. So as soon as he actually passed away, and as soon as he passed away, the interest waned pretty quickly. So then we had somebody else come and approach us one day, just out of the blue, emailed and said, hey, I see what you're making here. Can I be your marketer over here, or your distributor? And so this is where we've got the guy now. So he's really good.
Okay, and because you said that it's crucial to find the right distributor, and I was going to ask, how do you find the right distributor? But it sounds like that one just came out of the blue.
And the American one was the same. America was one of those things. So we used to do it through, in the States, we did it first through Main Freight, the DC and the distribution center in Atlanta. But because it was just a pick and pack and send away, it was nobody that had a vested interest in the industry. The American one was one that they just out of the blue during COVID actually emailed us and said, hey, we can see a market for these things. Can we be your distributor? So we first, you're always a little bit cautious about somebody like that. Do you think, are they going to pinch my idea and that's it, it's gone? So we did a bit of research on them, found them to be a reputable company over there. So we then sent a small pallet full of stuff, and the next they got rid of those pretty quickly, and they said, well, let's just commit to a container full. It was a 20-foot container, but still a container full of gates, so that's how that started. Meanwhile, Australia was already in the same boat. This guy had sort of he was a rep for Elders on the road, and he had quite a loose lead on him, where they used to allow him to do a lot of stuff. And so this first started off as a moonlighting job, but they also looked at it and thought, well, this is actually beneficial for us as well. This is Elders. This is beneficial for us as well, because what he's going to be doing is going on farm and, talking to the farmer of, hey, you interested in a ride over gate? Oh, by the way, are you needing some feed or something as well? So it was a double whammy for them. So they were actually quite pleased for him to be able to do that.
That's a great first entry into the country with a salesman out there. Yeah. And so getting the right distributor, really crucial. And then what do you do to maintain that relationship?
So in both countries, we have made a very a strong point of actually meeting with them. So Australia, he was going for about 3 years, I think, and then we said, we've got to go and meet him. And so we joined him for a couple of field days first. So I think the first one was actually in Wrangler. I met him there in southern Victoria, and then we did. He and I did one up in northern Victoria, and the name of the place I forgot it now. But and then we also did AgFest, which is based in Tasmania. So we stayed with him a couple of times, and so the relationship grew. To the point now we're best of friends, and they came and visited us last week. When was it? August. They were here. So they came and visited us. America, the same thing. We actually were going there for, like I say, it was actually during COVID when they approached us. So that was about 2000, and then it was 2020. Sorry, and we said last year, 24, the year before. So in 24, we said we must make a point of meeting these guys. So we decided to go and visit them and see their surrounds and see America basically, and see how it all rolled, how it all functioned, because what you see on TV is so different to what the real world is. It's just so different, and we thought, okay, we want to actually see properly what we're looking at, who we're dealing with here. So.
What market insights did you pick up from being on the ground there in the US?
The most interesting one is once again, Americans are very parochial as well. So their product, made in America is great. You got to have American stuff. But one of the big market insights was in our marketing campaign that we used. They used to use some of the photos that we already had back here in New Zealand and Australia. And the guy on the guy that was responsible for the marketing in that firm, he took one look at the photos and he said to us, hey, that's not over here. We don't do that here. And this was a case of the farmer wearing a pair of overalls. And he said, we don't wear overalls. We wear coveralls, which wear the big ones, and that's way down sort of south. But where they are, they don't wear coveralls or overalls. So I said, that's something you need to change. And so it's just finding that, and then in particular too, here in New Zealand, when we send, say, one or two ride over gates by themselves, because we have curtain siders over here, so here in Australia and I think in the UK as well, and that we have curtain siders in the trucks. And in America, it's all a load from the rear of the truck. So when they go, they're talking about semis there, the 18-wheelers is what they call them. So they have the semis. So the way they load the trucks are first to go out is last to go in. So they have a very specific way in which they load these trucks, and they can't then alter the route, because all of a sudden, if they have a set route that they're going to go and travel and drop stuff off, and suddenly this product is not actually in the queue that it's supposed to be, they have to pull all this other stuff out first to get back to it again. So it suddenly changed our idea of, for us it's not a problem because we're sending a container full so they can sort it out at their end, but they have to package and market the product in such a way that that when they put it in the truck, it can be upright, because they won't tolerate it can't be flat pack, because it goes if it's lying flat, unless they can stack something else on top of it, and in a lot of cases they can't, it's taken up on floor space. So if you've got 3 or 4 ride over gates sitting there on a pallet, that might be say 2 meters or 2.1 wide by 1.5 by 1.5, 2.1 long by 1.5 wide, and you go about 300 or 400 mil off the ground, there's a lot of empty space that you're paying for the freight there. So they have to try and make it work in such a way that when they palletize and pack stuff up, that it can be sit upright and doesn't take up a lot of space in the truck.
That's a fascinating insight that you would never get from just being over here in New Zealand.
Not
But
at all.
once you're there and you realize the way our product is packaged is completely inefficient for their transport system, that's fascinating.
And you don't know what you don't know. It's unless you go there and you actually speak to the people on the ground, or you've been told by somebody, you don't even think about that. And, you watch these TV programs about all these semis that are driving over there. You see very, very, very few truck and trailers. It's pretty much all semis over there. And as I said, it's all rear-end load. So it's something that you don't even think about.
With the foreign photos that you see, or they're looking at thinking that looks foreign because the farmer's wearing the wrong clothes, and also you in our pre-interview you said about even mud flaps on the 4x4, and they're looking at that going, that just looks so foreign. Yes, correct. Yeah. And you don't, once again, you don't know what you don't know. You don't think about that sort of thing. So Australia's a little bit different because they're, like I say, they're very receptive to our ideas, and they don't mind that. And the Americans don't mind it either, but for them to want to be able to buy this product, they want to see, this is what we do over here. So it's we can sell more product by having the pictures and the wording like it come from from our distributor based over there, rather than actually coming from New Zealand and then selling it over there. I think that's really interesting insights, especially as we go to market overseas. We don't know what we don't know, but making it feel local sounds like it should connect with the audience a whole lot more.
Yeah. Well, people like to buy from people. That's one thing I certainly picked up when I was working at Wrightson's and at Farm Source, because when I moved from Wrightson's through to Farm Source, all of a sudden I found these customers that were with me at Wrightson's and now suddenly at Farm Source, and it's people like to buy from people, and so you get the same thing too with this parochial sort of thing. People like to buy a product that's made in your country. It might not be made in your country, but it looks like, or it sounds like, it's actually been made here. So
it needs to look like locals are using it.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Wilco, this has been a fascinating conversation. Congrats on the great success with growing the business from innovation to now selling in New Zealand and exporting around the world. It's been great hearing your story. If people are interested in any of your products or to get in touch, what's the best way?
They can either look at our website, so that's www.thewrangler.co.nz, or they can ring us on 0800 Hooves, and that's HOOVES. So then or look us up on the website, like I say, or see us at Fieldays.
That's the one. Wilco, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. And check out our other interviews. This show is proudly brought to you by my agency, Duoplus. We are the digital marketing agency for businesses focused on growth. So if you're an owner or manager in a business with strong growth goals, book a free call with one of our strategists at duoplus.nz.